Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on where you're listening. Welcome back to AI and the Future of Work. Thanks again for making this one of the most downloaded podcasts about the future of work. If you enjoy what we do, please like, comment, and share in your favorite podcast app, and we'll keep sharing great conversations like the one we have for today. I'm your host, Dan Turchin, advisor at Insight Finder, the system of intelligence for IT operations, and CEO of PeopleRain, the AI platform for IT and HR employee service. We learn a lot from AI thought leaders weekly on this show. And of course, the added bonus is you get one AI fun fact each week. Today's fun fact: researchers from MIT and IBM have discovered a novel way to improve both fairness and accuracy in AI, topic we discuss frequently on this show. In the past, improving accuracy has typically come at the cost of introducing bias that impacts underrepresented groups from the training data. Well, this new technique involves isolating the decisions that get automated across types of users, for example, white and black, or male and female. They've termed the approach monotonic selective risk. Two neural nets are used to make predictions that traditionally just required one. The first model includes all features which may have encoded bias, but the second model excludes those features. When the models disagree, humans review the output and decide whether or not the biased data was the culprit. We talk a lot about the principles of responsible AI. Monotonic selective risk may or may not be how we ultimately fix the problem. But you know what? Just raising awareness that biased AI is ubiquitous is, in my opinion, what's needed to improve public trust in machines making important decisions like who goes to prison or who gets a loan. We'll link to the full research paper in the show notes. But now shifting to this week's conversation, we're becoming more and more comfortable chatting with bots to accomplish simple tasks like checking our bank balance, updating our address, or just confirming an appointment. That represents a massive shift in how we think about service interactions with brands. Most of us would now rather talk to a bot than wait on hold for a human, or certainly create a ticket. That is, as long as we don't have to repeat ourselves or get blocked by loud background noise or to have to contend with perhaps a non-English accent impacting the ability of the NLP. NLP backed by AI from services like Amazon Alexa or Apple Siri have dramatically shifted our attitudes about what conversational assistants are capable of doing. Today's guest is helping define this industry and changing those perceptions about the value of bots. He believes everyone should have access to bot experiences at least as good as the ones they have with Alexa and Siri. It's a bold vision, but Forethought's making amazing progress. Deon Nicholas started the company in 2017 with a vision to deliver on the promise of human-centered AI. He has since raised $92 million from an exceptional group of investors that includes funds like Steadfast Capital and NEA, plus some celebrities like Gwyneth Paltrow, Ashton Kutcher, and Robert Downey Jr. Deon won the TechCrunch Disrupt Battlefield startup competition in 2018 and is a member of the Forbes 30 Under 30. He's also a mentor and advisor to founders of color. And without further ado, Deon, it's my pleasure to welcome you to the podcast. Let's get started by maybe having you share a little bit more about your background and how you got into this space.
Absolutely, Dan. Well, thank you so much for having me on the show today, and thank you so much for the kind words. So a little bit of background about myself. I'm Deon Nicholas, CEO and co-founder of Forethought. I grew up in Canada, in Toronto, inner city Toronto. I learned to code at a reasonably young age, and that became my passion. In high school, had a after-school job to help, pay the bills and things like that. And it was in customer service. So I was stocking shelves at a local pharmacy, answering customer questions, answering customer calls. And at the time, I always had this acute sense that I don't always have all the answers. And at the same time, my customers don't always have all the information that they need to make the right decisions. And so that really got me down this train of thought of how can we use technology to help people get their questions answered. Fast forward, I ended up going out to school, becoming an engineer. I've built products and infrastructure at companies like Facebook, Palantir, Dropbox, and Pure Storage. But this idea that technology can help people answer questions really never left me. How can we use AI, human-centered AI, to make people's lives better became kind of a mission in my life. And so eventually I started Forethought, and we launched, as you mentioned, at TechCrunch Disrupt in 2018. And it's super cool to kind of see now the kinds of companies and folks we're working with today, including my former employer, Pure Storage, who's now a customer in their customer service department and customer support team. So I'm super excited about being here, super excited to be on this journey and using human-centered AI to transform how people and businesses interact.
You and I both got our start in customer service. I wasn't stocking shelves, but I worked at Disney in the parks. A lot of people find it, I don't know, non-intuitive maybe, that the reason I'm so passionate about AI is because I believe in the power of humans. And I believe in the power of technology to make humans better. You and I share similar philosophy on human-centered AI. Talk to us about what that means to you.
Absolutely. So human-centered AI is this term that we had started hearing about, term that we had started using internally here at Forethought, really in stark contrast to what most people think AI is about. Surprisingly, most people, when they think about AI, they think purely about automation. They think, for example, in the customer service world, they make it synonymous with the word deflection, right? Let's use AI to deflect our customers. Well, what if you flip the script on its head? Instead of thinking about AI as purely a way to deflect your customers or automate away jobs, what if you thought about AI as a way to empower people, empower those agents who are getting their job done, empower those customers to get their information in a self-service fashion? You'd stop thinking about deflecting customers as your primary metric, and you'd start thinking about solving customer problems as your primary metric, whether that requires a human or not. Right. And so we started to think about all the different ways that you can embed human-centered AI into the life cycle of customer service and in many different areas. And so first and foremost, help solve their problem in a self-service fashion. But there are many, many cases where that's not required and it actually makes the experience worse. Imagine trust and safety issues, or imagine issues that require human nuance and judgment. In those cases, you should be using AI actually to get the customer to an agent as quickly as possible and make sure that they're talking to the most skilled agent at their problem. And that's when AI can start to become super powerful, is when you can actually solve the problems automatically in some cases, and then accelerate that human interaction in the others, and you can start to make magic happen.
Deon, I had a feeling I'd enjoy this one. You and I are brothers from another mother.
Absolutely.
So you mentioned Pure Storage. Maybe if you could, just the top of the conversation, share with us a customer that you're most proud of that uses Forethought, and what do they do with it?
Absolutely. I mean, I'll use Pure Storage, I guess, as a good example of this. Maybe it's just primed because I had mentioned them before, but this is a story I'm super proud of. So as an example, I used to be an engineer at Pure Storage, and they're a data storage and infrastructure company. And I'd spent some time with the folks in customer service, just, friends and colleagues of mine, as well as just thinking about the problem space. And so eventually when I went to go start a company, using a lot of actually the skills I had learned at Pure Storage, because we were, kind of building a very small startup-like project within the company. Immediately, I went back and started talking to folks at my former employer. And I was like, hey guys, I know we ourselves experience this problem in customer support. And Pure is one of those companies that is very, very focused on the consumer experience, on the customer experience, to the point where, and I think they talk about this and tout this a lot, is they will make it very, very easy for anyone to raise an escalation. So if you have any problem whatsoever and you need to speak to a service manager, or even going up to the VP of customer support, it's built right into their platform that you can raise an escalation because they care so much about the customer experience. And they deliver this experience, this world-class experience, basically with this guarantee built in. But what was happening was they were finding that there were actually cases where, one, people were escalating, they were escalating and the issue didn't actually require escalation, but they would, dive in and help with the problem anyway. And two, there were cases where you should be able to guess that the the experience was going south for some reason for the customer. And you should be able to guess before they have to hit the escalation button and kind of raise the alarm bell that something was going wrong. And so with Forethought, we ended up launching our triage product to them, which is, as I mentioned earlier, the product that helps connect customers to agents. And they used it in this really cool use case to actually be able to predict with AI based on the conversation, how the conversation's trending, the back and forth, the propensity of this customer to escalate before they even knew it themselves. And so what we found was by launching this model, the agents were able to see just from the Forethought model, hey, this customer has a 90% likelihood of escalating in the next interaction. You should really be paying attention to them. And this ended up saving them, I believe, millions actually in terms of their customer support costs, because there were tons of these interactions which were very likely to go to escalation, which they were able to save early on and actually turn around those customers in a proactive way. And so that's one of the stories I'm super excited about, both in terms of the use case and also just being able to give back to folks I used to work with before. So that's a fun story.
So you and I share this passion for placing humans at the center of kind of the automation flywheel, but not everyone shares that vision or that passion. What would you say is the number one misconception about how and where AI could be disruptive in employee service?
I would say the number one misconception is really that AI equals automation, right? And we talked a little bit about this, but there are so many different use cases for artificial intelligence in a customer service organization that are really powerful. So for example, how can you start to look at conversation history? How can you start to look at how have agents asked and answered questions in the past and start generating insights, for example, like, hey, did you know that 20% of your incoming tickets are about password reset? And by the way, 90% of organizations that look like you have password reset built into their product. Maybe you should go and make this product change. Imagine the power that AI can bring to these organizations if you can start proactively guessing and figuring out what product updates need to be launched, or even what content articles need to be launched in their website, right? And so I do think that a lot of people reduce AI to very, very specific use cases, whereas it's much broader than that. And the reason for this misconception is the past wave of chatbots, right? And they were all about automation, ironically, and yet they weren't AI, right? And I like to say this phrase, they were a little bit more artificial than intelligent. So the first wave of chatbots that came around in the 2010s to late 2010s, early 2020s was really around no-code builders for decision trees. And so they would make it very, very easy. And kudos to them in that regard. They make it very easy for you to hard code if-then statements without using code or without using anything at all. And so you would say things like, if I see word refund, go and issue refund. And this became automation in and of itself, right? People were able to get their customers deflected, right? When they say refund, okay, move them down this path. But in many ways, it was really just the digitization of phone trees, right? The same thing, when you call and it's like press 1 for refunds, press 2 for billing or whatever. I may have just said the same thing redundantly, but that, when you take it to the digital space, that's what the first generation of chatbots really did. And so there was a place for that, but they ended up becoming synonymous with AI, even though there's not much artificial intelligence in there. It's pretty easy to create a keyword-based system that can do that. And so I think that I kind of identify two misconceptions that are stemming from the same problem. One is that AI equals automation. And two is that the past generation of automation equals AI, right? And in both cases, those were not actually true. And we're seeing natural language understanding, natural language processing, what we like to call this human-centered AI, is completely ushering in a new wave of technology that's kind of going to help you, think outside the box, so to speak.
So Forethought customers span a bunch of different industries. And you gave the use case of like triage for Pure Storage. So this customer is 90% likely to require an escalation. Maybe I can intervene sooner. Now, it strikes me that whether it's Pure Storage versus Hopin or Qualtrics, or I've seen some amazing logos on your website, the way that you might detect the likelihood of an escalation, I would think it would go beyond pure kind of traditional sentiment analysis. Like there would actually have to be a model that kind of understands the kinds of issues that a Pure Storage customer might have versus a Hopin customer.
Yep.
How does Forethought address that need to build models that are very domain specific?
Absolutely. One of my favorite things to talk about as an AI geek. But the interesting thing, and this was another paradigm shift that my co-founder Sammy and I had when we started this company, was that most systems were leveraging these keyword based, these decision tree based paradigms. What they weren't leveraging was the mass amounts of data that existed in these customer service systems. When we go and launch a customer, and we primarily work with kind of mid to large companies, so mid-market is what we talk about. We work with some smaller companies, some much larger, but primarily we're in that mid-market. And a lot of these companies, they've been scaling, or they're on track, on path to IPO. A lot of the ones you just said there, or they've recently IPO'd. And you find that regardless of how sophisticated the technology was that they were using, they have always had customer service in some way, shape, or form. They've had their help desk, they've had ticketing, they've had either email or chat or whatever. And there's this plethora of information. How was this question asked? What words were used? What did the agent actually go and do? Did they go and jump into this system here? Did they respond in this way? Did they label the ticket themselves as a P1 or a P0 in terms of priority? Did they escalate it? And you realize that there's all of this data just sitting in the customer service team that is just completely unused. And so to answer your question about how do you go about building a model or multiple models across many different industries, why can Forethought have high growth consumer companies like an Instacart, but also a deep tech company like a Pure Storage? It's because we realize that you can start stage one by building a model that is truly human-centered, uses natural language understanding, and is trained on a more broad data set. But at any given customer, by leveraging their data, you can actually start to build a model that is tighter, that understands the use case. So for example, if you're launching to a healthcare customer, maybe the word triage in and of itself means something very different than to a grocery store customer, right? Or something like that. And so we found that by leveraging the data, and we've done a lot around our models to be able to fine tune to specific use cases, we're able to launch much better products to our customers.
So using that example of triage, one of the core principles of AI is that it all comes down to a data problem. It's all about data, not just quantity, but consistency.
Yep.
And we'll call it hygiene, right? How do you think about the responsibility of Forethought to train models when you know that there's bias encoded in the data? And I'll give you an example of, we're in a similar space. There are ways that bias can creep into these models that are very innocuous. Let's say, there are regional differences, and maybe, certain regions are unrepresented, or I should say underrepresented in the data. And so maybe, you end up routing it wrong, or you make an insensitive recommendation to an agent because it doesn't take into account the fact that there were policies or, language differences or cultural differences. That's not a topic we're going to resolve on this podcast, but I'd love to get your thoughts on just how you and the team think about the encoded data, the encoded bias in data.
Absolutely. I think this is a really kind of deep, almost research problem throughout the AI industry. There's a few ways to think about it. The first way to think about that and to combat that is by having more diverse labelers, data sets, and things like that. It kind of starts with building your team in a diverse way. Ironically, I'm sure we've all heard of the story of when YouTube first launched for mobile, they were getting a ton of videos that were coming in upside down. And the reason for it is that they had never tested it with left-handed people, right? And so by having, because most of the engineers on the team are right-handed, you end up finding that they ended up not testing it. And so I do think it really does start with any team building out an AI model or any piece of technology. By having more diverse viewpoints in the actual development process or the data collection process, you're actually just more likely to be representative, to catch, hey, this facial recognition technology doesn't work well on people with darker skin tones because, hey, I happen to have a darker skin tone. I tried it out and I dig deeper and, oh yeah, there's actually an inherent bias there. And so for better or for worse, the learn by osmosis, so to speak, of having a more diverse team will actually make an impact because that's where the data comes from at the end of the day. The second thing I've thought about, we haven't yet implemented here, but there are a ton of services kind of across the data labeling space. So a friend of mine started a company called Eris Intelligence, and what they do is literally all about diverse data collection. So they actually work with end users and consumers to collect data, and they make sure that they're doing it from different regions and different accents and dialects and things like that. So I've actually looked into a lot of folks doing that and have mentored and worked with some folks in those spaces. So I think, like you said, it all starts with the data, but ironically, I would say it starts with the awareness, right? Because a lot of teams will go through and collect all the data and do all the things, and then they won't even think that there could be an issue. But it's funny because machine learning 101, don't overfit. It's kind of like the first thing you learn in school, but when it applies in the real world, especially in this case, a lot of people forget about that.
I like that article that I summarized about the MIT IBM approach, where it's novel, but it's pretty simple at a conceptual level, right? Use two neural nets. One, train on all the features, and the second, remove anything that could potentially introduce bias. Make the same decision using that one and see if they're different, then at least where to isolate your decision making.
Yeah. I was actually thinking about that. It's kind of reminds me of generative adversarial networks. So the technology they use nowadays to generate Shakespeare or generate a picture and that looks like it was created by a human. For the audience, the way those are built are they create two models. One model is trying to produce a piece of content a picture or a piece of text, and the other model is all its job is trained to detect how real is this? Was this created by an AI or was this created by a human? And you give it a score. And so you have these two models that are basically being pitted against each other, one trying to outsmart the other and the other trying to figure out if this was actually human generated text or AI generated text. And then after, a gazillion iterations of this, you get really powerful technology. I actually strongly suspect, and I haven't read the paper, but I'm definitely going to go take a look, but I suspect you can do something very similar on bias. Hey, generate this. Hey, is this biased? Yes, no, repeat, and build things from there.
So as AI vendors, are we responsible for the quality of the data that we use to train our models?
Yeah, I would say so. And I mean, it's easier said than done, quite frankly, right? Everyone's gonna make mistakes. It's a hard problem in general, but it is also one of those problems that if you don't actually look at it and prioritize it, it will not get done, right? And so on the one hand, you can say, yeah, it's hard, everyone, blah, blah, blah. But on the other hand, I would say we have that responsibility. One, because it makes business sense. You're going to have better AI, better models. And two, it's the right thing to do.
We had a fascinating conversation with a guest by the name of Krishna Gade, who's the CEO of a company called Fiddler. And what Fiddler is an explainability platform. So it's essentially a way to test the integrity of an AI model. And it's a fascinating discussion where he goes through the process of how you actually take an automated decision that might be, a deep neural net and deconstruct how what parameters and with what weights were used to make the decision, so that in theory you could instrument into a product like Forethought an explanation for what was done, and then maybe some kind of UI and UX to be able to correct a decision that you don't like. I envision a time where any vendor who includes any AI there's going to be, kind of like a hygiene score for your AI, kind of like when you go into a restaurant, there's a hygiene score because someone came and looked at the kitchen, right? And you don't want to really eat at the, the Roach Motel. You're going to go to the next business and, eat at the one that has an A hanging in the window. Do you envision a time where as AI vendors, there'll be some kind of a standard that will be held to?
This is super cool. And I hadn't really thought about this until you kind of described that, but I have a really potent analogy. And I think the answer is yes. Just as you were saying that, when computers and software came about, right? At first it was, hey, let's build the software and so on. We shifted to the cloud. Okay, let's build cloud. And then you have these now billion-dollar companies who are all about analytics, monitoring of the platforms, right? So Datadog, a Forethought customer, for example, that's what they do, right? Cloud monitoring as a service. And as you're building technology, you're going to need this to be able to say, hey, how is this service running, and so on and so forth. And I think the same will be true with ML, with models, right? Because really what we're doing is there's just this new paradigm shift in how software gets written. Instead of writing code to do the thing, you write code that learns how to do the thing, right? And so then being able to audit that, I was just, the analogy or the kind of like aha moment as you were saying that, I was like, okay, then there's going to be like the equivalence of the Datadogs for ML monitoring, right? And so I would highly suspect that there's a powerful analogy there.
Yeah, that's a really good way to think about it. Maybe talk a little bit more about how does Datadog use Forethought?
Absolutely. So a lot of companies, so you'll notice that we actually work with a lot of companies across different areas. A lot of our businesses, I mentioned the triage use case already. A lot of our customers use us for solve, right? So you can put a widget on your website in order to respond to questions as well. And then our third product is a tool called Assist. And it's actually a Chrome extension for the agents themselves, built on the same data, but gives them suggestions, automated answers, resources, search tools, and things like that, so that your newest agents can operate like very experienced agents. And so companies like Datadog and others use a wide variety of our products across the stack.
So one of the things that's easiest to talk about is places like Datadog and Pure Storage, where you've made customers very successful. But I think part of the conversation around just being intellectually honest and thorough when you're in a space like ours is talking about what could go wrong. When you think about how Forethought's applying AI, how do you and the team think about the protecting the downside or some of the inherent risks of introducing more automated decisions?
I think it goes back to what we were talking about before. Well, two things. One, bias is important to always be minimizing, because a biased AI is a pretty bad AI nonetheless, right? And then two, accuracy, right? So you always want to make sure there is a way to audit what good looks like. And the actual secret, if I'm going to talk more about kind of under the hood here, the secret is that could actually become a very powerful way to build compounding advantage, right? So if you launch a system and you spend any amount of research and R&D on creating implicit measurements of like, was this right or not, you get the equivalent of Google's click-through rate, right? Like Google's search engine is really powerful because they know when you've clicked the top link or when you've clicked link number 10. Similarly, if we suggest an answer to an agent and they either use it or we see them copy paste, or there's a high, longest common substring or whatever, that tells you that that's a very powerful answer or a used answer, versus if we don't see any overlap with what the agent said and what we suggested, then that was probably not the right answer. And so there's all of these different ways you can build either explicit, think your thumbs up, thumbs down, or implicit in terms of, did they even use it, or was there overlap here? Signals for success for the model. And that does, one, it helps you, gain customer confidence that you know what you're doing. Two, helps you find bugs. And three, helps you build what is kind of the holy grail of an AI ML system, one that can actually learn and compound its ability to scale over time. And that's how you come out as being the Google rather than, say, the Yahoo in search, right? And so, not that any of these companies are better, but you get my point. But that's kind of how I think about it.
So when Forethought is ubiquitous. How are we as humans different, and how is the world different?
My favorite question to answer, because yes, we're building a startup, we're building a business and all of those things. But at the end of the day, for me, one of the things I learned early on is that I care about solving really hard problems, and I care about having impact on people. And that's really what matters, is having an impact on people. And for me, I can do that by, solving technical problems, because that's just the thing I happen to be good at doing. And so when I think about that, I think about our Forethought mission, right? We care about using AI to unlock potential, to help people save time, save energy, focus their attention, save money, right? And that will enable humanity to do more at the end of the day. And I think that's true in customer service, because every single one of us interacts with businesses through customer service. I think that's going to be true in how we do HR and IT, right? I think that's going to be true in how we bring products to market. And so at the end of the day, when I talk about our mission here at Forethought, I truly believe that we are here to help unlock human potential through artificial intelligence. And hopefully everyone, when you're interacting with businesses or otherwise, you have a Forethought AI, so to speak, that can help you do that.
I love the vision. I got to get you off the hot seat, but not before you answer one last question for me. So you've had an amazing journey as an entrepreneur, and you shared your background as an engineer, and you've been so successful in so many ways, you and the team and your co-founders. Talk me through the thing that has surprised you most about your entrepreneurial journey to date.
Oh, thank you. First of all, thank you so much for the kind words. For me, the thing that has surprised me the most is how deeply aligned the company growth journey is. And if we're successful, in order for me and the company to be successful, how deeply aligned that is with my personal growth journey, so to speak. And so every 3 to 6 months, I feel like the company has morphed. We've met a new milestone. It's a different kind of company. And in that same vein, I feel like I have to grow as a human, and as a leader, in order to keep reaching the next milestone. And it's different, right? In the early days, it's all about technology and product and getting to product market fit. And then as you scale, it's about people and culture and recruiting. And for me now, one of the biggest things I'm learning how to do is how to be a manager, how to be a leader, how to empower people to do the best work of their lives, right? And it's just so interesting to see that, like, every single day I'm trying to unlearn my old habits in order to gain new ones that will help us get, if we went from 1 to 10, how do we go from 10 to 50 to 100? And you also have to really get to know yourself, your strengths, your weaknesses, and then bring on people who can either amplify those strengths, account for those weaknesses, teach you something new, and all of that. So that's really been the most surprising but also rewarding thing about this journey.
It's very gratifying and rewarding, but it's also very humbling, isn't it?
Absolutely. Just the learning process and the growth, it is insanely humbling.
Well, Deon, congrats on the success so far. I hope we'll have a chance to talk again, maybe in a couple quarters or next year sometime, and you'll be able to share with us more about the success that you and the team are having.
Likewise. Thank you so much, Dan, and looking forward to staying in touch. And for anyone in terms of the audience who wants to get in touch, my Twitter is @DojiDeon, and you can find Forethought at www.forethought.ai. And I will do one last shameless plug, if that's cool. But we are having our inaugural conference on the future of the customer experience, Forward, on September 8th, 2022. So if anyone wants to learn more, you can register for free at forward.forethought.ai. Thank you all so much for having me. And thank you so much, Dan.
Deon, great work. My pleasure. We will link to all those resources in the show notes. And on behalf of all the audience, I'd say we're all rooting for you and Forethought to succeed.
Thank you so much. Cheers.
Great hanging out. All right. Well, that's a wrap for this week on AI and the future of work. Again, I'm your host, Dan Turchin, CEO of PeopleRain. And of course, we're back next week with another fascinating guest.